welcome to this week's Kids Church Mindful Moment. Have you ever gotten in trouble and had to face the consequences? We have a story about that to share this morning, and a craft to make that might help you to find some grounding and some ways through those difficult moments. But first, let's jump into this story that we have. We've been following the story of Paul for a little bit. Paul was a teacher who lived after Jesus. He was changed by the story of Jesus and inspired to share that story. But Paul still got in trouble because the message that Paul shared of love over power and of people coming together and being all valued by God, well, that still wasn't a popular message. And it got Paul in trouble with the authorities. And that's the story that we want to focus on today. You can read it here in the book of Acts. In the story, we find Paul and his friend Silas in a jail. They have gotten the wrong people angry with their message. So, what do they do? What do you do when you get in trouble? What does that feel like when you have to face the consequences of having done something that was either wrong or that was considered wrong, but maybe it was the right thing to do anyhow? In Paul and Silas's case, it was probably the right thing to do. But they got in trouble because the right thing to do wasn't what the authorities wanted people to do. So here they were sitting in jail. And I think we can imagine how they might have felt. Maybe a little bit scared, maybe worried. What would you do in that situation? Well, Paul and Silas in this situation decided to calm their fears and to bring grounding and to center themselves back on God. They prayed and they sang. And they prayed and they sang all night long. And in the story, we're told that the next morning, the ground began to shake, and it shook so violently that the walls of the jail broke. Now I wonder, if you were Paul and Silas, and the walls of your jail broke, what would you do? You might be surprised to find that Paul and Silas did nothing. Other people escaped from the jail, but Paul and Silas stayed where they were. When the guard realized what was happening and that people were escaping, he was devastated. Because even though it was an earthquake, he was going to get in trouble for having allowed the people in trouble to get away. Maybe that didn't seem fair to Paul and Silas, because they stayed put. And when the guard saw that they stayed in the jail, he asked, why? Paul and Silas, in their night with God, in their night with prayer and song, they felt comforted by God. They knew they weren't alone. God was with them. They trusted God. And they did not feel the fear to drive them running from those walls. In the story, we hear then that the guard invites Paul and Silas to his home. They share a meal together. He listens to their story, and he becomes a believer in Paul and Silas's God. I wonder, when you were in trouble, did you want to escape from being in trouble? If you had the opportunity to escape, would you have taken it? What kind of courage does it take to face the consequences of our actions, even when we mess up? I think what we can take away is that we all mess up sometimes. Maybe it's a real mess up, or maybe it's doing the right thing, but in the circumstances it's considered wrong. Maybe it is unfair, and we can react with anger, or we can ground ourselves, trust ourselves, trust that God is with us, Trust that even when we make mistakes, we are loved. So what I want to create today is a grounding rock. We're going to do some paint pouring over a rock. The rock reminding us of the story of Paul and Silas and how the earthquake shook the stones loose of those walls and allowed them to escape, and yet they stayed grounded. For this activity, you will need some paint. I've chosen to use 3 colors, and they are very different colors so that they can contrast each other. You will also need some white glue and some water. Something we're going to pour it over today is a rock. So I've chosen a nice rock that fits firmly in my hand. It has kind of smooth sides, and that's the rock that I'm going to use to pour the paint over. And then this is messy. So I have also found a big tray and some recycled newsprint, and I'm going to put my rock on that in the tray, so when I pour the paint and it goes everywhere, because it will go everywhere, it's caught and contained in the tray. All right, we've got everything we need. Let's get making some pour paint. I should have also mentioned we need some cups that we can use. We'll need 1 extra cup than we have colors. So right now I'm about to mix my colors together, but I have 4 cups ready. To start, let's shake one of our paint colors. We will add about 1/4's worth of paint in the bottom of our cup, and then add the same amount of glue. Then we're going to mix those 2 together, and you'll notice that is pretty thick. That's not very pourable. So that's where the water comes in. Add a little bit at a time and mix it until you have a fairly liquid consistency, maybe a little bit thicker than milk. I'm going to do that with my other 2 colors. Okay, I have a green, I have a pink, and I have a blue. Now I'm going to get my extra cup, and I'm going to pour it in a little bit at a time, some from each color, allowing them to layer at the bottom of the cup. We'll do 2 of each. Careful not to mix them too much. We don't want the colors to mix. We want them to stay layered. If we look in there, you can see there's still some pink and green and blue, and they're still separate. Now we're going to be very careful not to mix that cup too much. We're going to keep it steady. This is the fun part. This is where we get to pour. So I'm going to take the cup, and without mixing it, I'm going to slowly pour the paint colors all over the rock. And look, you can see them swirling. Stop when you want to, when you feel you have enough paint on there. This is why it's in a tray. There's lots of mess. Look at the marbling colors. Isn't that neat? Without moving this, I'm now going to let this dry. It will take some time. That's a lot of paint. So we have to be patient. Maybe let it sit overnight. Well, while I wait for that rock to dry, let me show you one I made earlier today. As you can see, I wrote the word brave on my rock as well. Maybe when your rock dries, you might want to think of a word you could put on that rock that will help you to feel centered and strong and brave and courageous, or hopeful or joyful when you hold that rock. So how do we use our centering rock? Well, you can use it the way that feels good for you. Use it so that you feel the weight and strength in your hand. Use it when you're feeling scattered or you're feeling afraid. Use it to feel the coolness, the hardness. Imagine that in that rock you are holding that very word you have put on it. With this rock, may I be brave. Brave to face the consequences of my mistakes, to learn from them, to grow from them, to feel grounded in that growth, and to look to God, knowing God is with me, whether I have made a mistake or not. So let us go into our week grounded with our rock, ready to hold that with us, to remind ourselves that God is with us through all of our trials. And let us go with a blessing on our heart to share with those around us. May there be love in your heart to give. May there be joy in your heart to share. And may there be courage in your heart to lift others up. See ya!